The Switch is an enigma that can only come from the likes of Nintendo, never one to follow the rules or the herd, instead forging their own path through entertainment's history. Just when they seem to be at a rocky end with the mass market abandonment, the chips are down, they again return with an unbeatable hand from the brink, a game they know well. Now, the Wii U was a total failure in every sense of the word, home to some incredible titles from Ninty, but not enough to repeat the success of the Wii. A rethink was needed again, jumping sides from ATI and now partnered with Nvidia, who still want to return to the console arena. They decided to merge the two markets into one, and the Switch was born. Underpowered compared to other consoles on the market, more expensive, and a relatively minuscule portfolio of titles on the store, many which just cement my thoughts of a nostalgia journey for the machine itself. Neo Geo games that could be run just as well on modern phones, Wii U ports or sequels that deliver a small refresh on the originals, and as expected, these will become a plentiful source to extend the catalogue further still. Any other company would have retreated, licking their wounds. Instead, they cannot make enough to fulfill demand. Only Nintendo, eh? Now, some new titles are peppered into the mix. Even the Game of the Year Wii U title managed to give many, myself included, enough reason to snap up the hybrid handheld that is still hard to come by in the shops. Now, a title that falls into the sequel category and improvement is the paintball gone mad multiplayer action of Splatoon 2. It is a defining game for the console in more ways than one. Now, like Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, among others, Splatoon 2 comes to the Switch as a Wii U port at its base. Due to the time it has taken to land on the console though, this may have had more time to better utilise the machine's hardware, but on surface value this is very close to its origins. The early beta I covered around launch even managed to have the same resolution from that port, 1280 by 720, with the dock mode dynamically adjusting far below that, with a low of 960 by 540. Now, this is something now present in the final release, tested here thanks to the pre-launch demo this weekend. The time from then till now has been used to improve the visual quality from that demo, hitting a new high now of 1920 by 1080 in docked mode, which is a welcome boost of 44% on the older ceiling. This is handled with using the now very common dynamic resolution scaling across both axes, which means we see a wide range of resolutions from this new peak down to an in-battle low of 1536 by 864, which is 36% below the native 1080p it can hit. But after a few counts, the resolution can fluctuate from frame to frame, so the mean ground is probably somewhere around 20% below the highest point. Now, this is not the lowest the game can render, mind. It now has a central hub area where you can meet other players, change outfits, and party like it's Jet Set Radio.
Let's look at the fun.
Could you stop playing with that radio of yours? I'm trying to get to sleep.
It's also how the central single-player game works, with you progressing through the game through the sewer points. This higher density, better lighting with cube maps, point lights, bokeh depth of field, higher texture quality in normal maps, and much higher polygon count does have a cost though, and more than you may think. Not only does the resolution now lock out at the old 720p here, but the frame rate is also cut in half to 30. This is solid with a consistent pacing bar. A couple of early flips do appear, common for double buffer titles. As they finish a frame slightly early, they are allowed to flip so that the next frame can begin buffering. This gap can be very easily felt in the controls, and it would have been nice to keep these at the same 60 FPS the actual game plays out at. It is a high cost for these more modern post-filled visuals and much more detailed geometry. Although the improvements are obvious, the cost does seem higher than expected, and demonstrates how bandwidth starved the machine is once you start ramping up the texture, samples and post taps, not to mention the poly count. Now, this is demonstrated by the section also using bilinear filtering here within a few feet of the player, and this does suggest that this is a higher cost than it should actually be, and maybe a leftover of the base spec that many devs will target, Nintendo included, of the handheld itself, which this may be a direct result of, and it probably will be patched and improved in the final release. And from the release single player footage I have seen, this appears to be true, as that does indeed render at 1080p from the shots I looked at, but again, it does have the same 30 FPS as the World Hub we see here. Now, aside the dropping of the frame rate, the drop in resolution is also very apparent here, and does reduce the IQ in the game, with shimmer still as present as before due to the lack of any AA as well, which is exactly the same as the beta. But also the impact on the texture quality and filtering can reduce the impact these much denser areas are intended to deliver. but most likely this is intended, or the visual quality is intended for the handheld mode, so it will look a lot better when you're playing it on that. And hopefully the final game will deliver all these sections at the 1080p with a dynamic scaling solution to keep it much cleaner and much closer to what we see in the in-game battles. Now happily, this is the low point of the title on this score. Once into the decorative battles, the action never dips below that flat 16 millisecond line from many games tested, and it is a stalwart for the company as they sacrifice other areas, such as those covered before, to keep the performance consistent, and I applaud them for that. The issue is that the machine, as incredible as it is as a handheld, is still lacking the raw horsepower to achieve the target of the development teams. It is a very clean and almost clinical game in play, with angular edges, sharp and bright colours, giving it that distinct and stylish look. But this is let down in the docked mode with an almost screen swamping shimmer from all edges. Specular highlights that reduce the stylish artistry that has been lavished on the game. Some form of temporal AA would have helped here. Yes, it would soften what is a sharp game, but the reduction in image clarity would be of great benefit to the temporal stability. But this is still something Nintendo as a whole seem to shy away from. It's not all bad though. Character models are now much higher quality in polygon count, transparency effects and textures than on the U. Levels are also equally improved with overhead shadows, a wider choice of textures and soft transparency effects in play. The game does shy away from using many post effects though, which also keeps the performance at rock solid rate, with the heavy depth of field sprite sample effect being the highlight of that in game when you open the map or check out a player's stats. This does not affect the performance at all, which is very welcome. The paint effects are also improved as they splash alpha effects across the screen as you paint the town red, or purple. Screen filters also give a liquid run on the screen when hit with a paint bomb or depth with success. LOD is balanced well in the game, with scenery changing between looks around 3 LODs and it seems with a 0 LOD being close within your range, and it's not noticed at all in the heat of battle. The larger arenas with wider views of highways and cars do add a sense of scale to the battles, but they still look much more reminiscent of a Dreamcast era Sonic game than modern titles, but this is again expected from both the console's aims and the developers' aspirations, and you can also see the difference between the hub mode and the 60 FPS battle mode. This is the sacrifice you're going to see. It must be said as well that the splat paint effects are improved over the original Wii. They seem to form a physical body as they splat across the areas, and when paint is mixed together it can break down into smaller chunks, almost like tessellated areas, and it does look very nice in play. It has other nice touches as well, from the remix options you have in the pre-game lobbies, slowing and mixing in tracks using the controller. To the choice customizing your character before you start, along with controls allowing both the motion control tilt and aim choices to the much more standard dual analog sticks. And the controls are tight and responsive, always accurate with fast turn and aim, giving you a fair crack of victory dependent on your chosen weapon. The dual wield is quite powerful, but I prefer the roller for winning matches, as it is by far the quickest way to paint the arena and can be as equally productive in taking out the enemy, so long as you use a stealth approach rather than head on. The rifle is the best for up close battles, but from afar is lacking in accuracy and range, and as the demo it is also limited to the same 4 weapons as before. So when you start you can earn power up bombs or flying soaker weapons, which can make some matches feel slightly overpowered if more than one member on the opposite team has them. It is a fun title to play. Choosing a side and then splatting your enemies is a great way to while away a few hours. I do feel it is a little slow for map traversal though, and turning at times, which can make some points frustration as you have to travel back to the middle of the map to repay the favour, but overall the fun factor greatly outweighs the frustration one. Now this is not my concern with the title though. Aside the technical issues and speed as covered before, it is the longevity and interest factor that is the most concerning, which comes from the game's cost. Again, value. £50 or $65 is a great deal of money for what is an arena-based shooter with a limited amount of single-player content. It does bear more than a passing resemblance to the Sega gem in Jet Set Radio. Weeble-like speech, hip and stylized characters, a vast city to explore, and paint rather than graffiti. Even a new form of grinding is in. But how large and diverse this campaign is, or the gameplay mechanics themselves, set pieces and weapons, will all remain to be seen. And again, how these will fit into the multiplayer battle to keep them from feeling overpowered on each side and basically grinding your way through to actually feel competent in the game. But I am looking forward to giving it a fair crack once it launches, but I'll be picking up a retail card in the case that, like the first game, my attention span with the title may wane much quicker than the £50 I paid for it. Now, it may become more of the same, but in a slightly refined box. Anyway, as always, I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this, and my Switch coverage will continue with more titles. If you did enjoy this or want to look at other titles or other games, then please leave your feedback below, follow me on Twitter and leave it there. And if you want to support me and improve the channel and website even further, then you can even support me on Patreon now. I'll catch you on the next one.